What's going on, everybody? I'm Max Ralph.
Seth Engle.
Today, got a podcast coming at you. We're getting close to BlueWhite, and we're going to touch a little bit on a new entrant into the transfer portal. Last time we talked a lot about Josh Chandler-Semedo from West Virginia, filling in that linebacker spot, potentially, that Penn State really needs. And there was another linebacker entry today, Eric Gentry from Arizona State, who is a native of Philadelphia, not a school that Penn State has a lot of ties to, but he went on 2 unofficial visits to Penn State, though never got offered. But at Arizona State this year was successful. Seth, is this a name that Penn State should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so I think his location from Philly, I think that stands out right away. Linebacker's a position of need, but not necessarily the linebacker that Eric Gentry plays. He's mostly an outside linebacker, plays a little bit of Sam. He can transition also to defensive end if they need some more edge presence after Damian Robinson. But, I mean, this really doesn't strike me as a huge position of need. I think the linebacker that Penn State needs is a middle linebacker, which is a little smaller. This guy's 6'6", 200 pounds.
Yeah.
It'd be a little funny to see him stick right there in the middle. So I'm not sure of the fit necessarily. But if Penn State wants some extra depth, I'm sure they'd be happy to take this guy.
Yeah, like I said, he visited twice unofficially. Penn State always in the transfer portal likes to look for guys who they recruited out of high school. Right. Gentry picked up 45 tackles and a sack as a true freshman, so he's clearly ready to contribute if he needs to. But like you said, I don't think it's what Penn State's looking for. Like we were saying just before we turned on the recording, what Penn State really needs is kind of like that 1 or 2 year rental guy in the linebacker room because they've got the young position players that they need, Keon Wiley, Abdul Carter, Ken Talley, even Kobe King, Jamari Budden. They're all guys who, in another year or two, then you've got 5 names that are ready to step on the field, assuming everyone pans out. So you don't really need a freshman or a sophomore to come in and be able to play in 2 years. You need a guy who's going to play right now.
Yeah, and I think especially with Damian Robinson coming in too, you talk about that immediate, success. Penn State got that with Robinson, but they also got, a potential future on the edge. So that would be, the type of guy, Eric Gentry would come in, one, he would check off both of those boxes. Penn State doesn't need both of those boxes to get checked off now. Right. They recruit well enough to the point where, they don't necessarily need to rely on the transfer portal for future. It's really just right now. So I agree with you on that, 1-2 year rental.
Yeah, and like you said, the Philadelphia thing is interesting, kind of makes it a little bit more like maybe he wants to get closer to home, and, Philadelphia is obviously close to Penn State. But, I don't know if it's – I don't know. I guess I would say I would be surprised to see Penn State heavily pursue him.
Yeah.
But in other news, BlueWhite Game, 2 days away. Format's going to be a little bit different this year. James Franklin confirmed it somewhat at practice last night. It's going to be an offense versus defense thing instead of splitting the roster into 2 teams. He said they will do a number of full go periods, like tackle to the ground, but there will also be a few periods where they're just thudding up, which basically means go full speed, just don't tackle to the ground. It kind of just sounds like it's going to be a practice like last spring was when they had the open practices to the public and media. They're working on a scoring system. I don't really know. They don't know where they're going at. That's what James Franklin said. But that's what's going on. And it's hard to tell things from the Blue-White Game. Everybody's young. You're doing intra-squad stuff. It's early. But there's certainly some storylines and especially players who we can look out for on Saturday.
Yeah. Well, I think Penn State fans will probably be drunk enough to the point where they don't realize that the game has changed at all. But I got some players in mind that I still think could make a big impact, and there's players to watch for. I think Mitchell Tinsley is a guy that screams at me as someone that Penn State fans don't know yet.
Yeah.
They haven't seen him, really.
He's been talked about enough, but it almost feels like he's not getting clamor from fans.
Even though Mitchell Tinsley was top 10 in receiving yards last year at Western Kentucky. I mean, the guy is really good.
Yeah.
It's already been proven. Everyone's hyping him up. He's going to be great this year if everything works out, if he stays healthy. I think that's just a guy that's he's probably going to go off in the Blue-White Game because that's just what he does. He plays well.
Yeah.
Who do you got?
I mean, Tinsley did play in an offense where they ran the ball about 5 times total in the entire season.
Yeah, but so did Penn State at the end of last year. So.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think he's a very underrated pickup in the portal.
Right.
But honestly, like, to ride the true freshman train, I think Nick Singleton is probably who I'm most excited to see on Sunday.
Yeah.
I think fans probably want to see Singleton and Drew Aller especially, but Singleton seems like the guy who is, like, most ready. Like, you look at him during, like, when we see practice, you look at him, he looks ready. Like, he doesn't look like a true freshman coming in here. He's huge. Right. James Franklin's also talked about Zane Durant being ready a lot, but out of those true freshmen, I think Nick Singleton is just gonna come in and, like, be close to ready right away. And I'm excited to watch him in the blue-white game because I think we've kind of been starved for that playmaking running back. Even though Kevon Lee, like, he struggled last year, but he has that potential. Nick Singleton, if he's as advertised, is kind of that guy. And then, of course, I also want to see Adisa Isaac.
We'll see how much they actually put him on the field,
yeah,
too.
I really don't expect him to be full go because James Franklin mentioned that there were a number of guys who were cleared to do the thudding and not full go. And I think Isaac's probably one of those guys. But even to just see him on the field is something that I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on the basis of true freshman, I think something that fans should look for and maybe have this expectation going in is that Drew Aller and Bo Pribula are not going to be amazing, probably.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They've been on campus now for 2 months. Mm-hmm. They're probably not ready. I mean, these are Big Ten football players. These guys have, they're going up against people like Jair Brown, who led the nation in interceptions last year.
Yeah.
Curtis Jacobs, one of the best linebackers in the conference. Probably not going to be ready. But another quarterback that I think people should look out for is Christian Veilleux, who I think has gone under the radar with the new quarterbacks coming in, Clifford returning. I've been saying this since Veilleux came in last year against Rutgers. That guy is a starter in Power 5 football. He's good,
yeah.
And, from what we've heard, he's only improved. So I think once he gets his reps, I think he's someone that could potentially wow in that game as well.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it when Sean Clifford officially announced he's coming back, but it's really just an awkward situation for Christian Veilleux now that Clifford is back. But I agree. He was super impressive against Rutgers in just a weird situation. There's so many names to look out for. I mean, we hear good thing about all these different guys because it's spring practice and the staff is going to hype their guys up. But I think the one that is probably, will back up the hype is Zakee Wheatley.
Yeah.
The safety room, we already know what we're getting in Jair Brown. We already know somewhat that Jalen Reed is going to contribute, even though he's only a sophomore. He played a bunch
last year. Yeah.
Zakee Wheatley redshirted last year and is making that move from cornerback to safety, and he is currently the takeaway king, according to both Terry Smith and Jair Brown at 5.
And Tarburton.
And so, like, you've got a redshirt freshman now who's switched positions and is just an absolute ball hawk in spring. Jair Brown said that he's making plays that, like, some veterans would struggle with. So there's, like, a ton of guys to look at, but I think overall, like, spring practice is for the young guys to shine. We saw it with Kalen King last year.
Right, for sure. No, and I think Zakee Wheatley, too. People have hyped up his ball hawk skills, takeaway king. People are talking about how good he is, in the run game, too. Yeah. The guy can move. He kind of just runs from side to side. He's a physical player. Yeah. He's someone like, it's one thing when you have a young guy like Jalen Reed who maybe, stepped up after having, somewhat of a major role last year. Zakee Wheatley played in 4 games. We really have not seen him at all.
Yeah.
All we've heard is that this guy has been phenomenal all spring.
Yeah.
So I'm like jumping out of my seat. I'm like, can't wait for Zakee Wheatley on Saturday. So
yeah. There's a lot to look out for. And like you said, you kind of have to temper your expectations because it is just a spring practice.
For sure.
But this is the time where we can at least get a little bit of a read on guys like Zakee Wheatley, who we haven't seen.
And it's football in the spring. Gotta love it.
Gotta love it. That's all for us. Potential transfer for Penn State out of the portal, maybe not. And blue-white game coming up this weekend with our top guys to watch. Thanks for watching. Keep along with us at collegian.psu.edu and on Twitter at PSU Footblog.